Hello, good evening. Good evening, everybody. You're all welcome to today's webinar. Our webinar today is titled Decarbonization of Energy in Nigeria. This is part one of a two-part series under the decarbonization subject. We'll be focusing on renewable energy today. So, next slide. So I guess if this is your first time joining us, first of all, welcome. We're glad to have you on board. We are the Efikos, and in case you're wondering who we are, answers are right there on the screen. We're an experienced team of professionals passionate about oil, gas, and energy development in sub-Saharan Africa. Our aim is to bring together a diverse group of engineers, scientists, commercial and finance professionals, and other stakeholders with interests across the oil and gas value chain. Our aim is to share knowledge and expertise to create value, and ours is a platform to support growth, development of energy, and indeed oil and gas industry in sub-Saharan Africa and beyond. So our agenda for this evening, we'll be talking about the energy transition process, and we'll be talking about decarbonization. So part one, as I mentioned before, is why we're here today. We're focusing on renewable energy, clean energy, and non-fossil based energy. So I'll be running you guys through an introduction and a quick overview. Then we have our first panelists who come in and talk to us about the financial and regulatory framework. Also, we have a second panelist who speak to us about strategic and technological considerations under the renewable energy umbrella. Then we have an entrepreneur perspective on solar inverter integration into the energy mix. As I mentioned before, this is part one of a two-part series. Part two will be focusing on carbon offsets, trading, carbon capture, use of hydrogen, use of biomass. All this will be part of our next webinar. The tentative date for the next webinar is the 19th of September. So I'm introduce myself. I'm the host for this evening. My name is Kola Kuponi. I'm a chartered engineer. I'm the director of NEK Consultants Limited here in London. I've got 19 years experience across concept, pre-feeds, feeds, EPC projects in the oil and gas industry and indeed the energy industry. My focus primarily is within Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've got a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from FET Mina, Niger State, Nigeria, University of Lagos, master's degree in water resources and environmental engineering. And also I've got a master's degree in pipeline engineering from Newcastle University. Also proud to say I'm one of the co-founding members of the Efikos movement. So, business of today, our first speaker, Ayotunde Funsho. Ayotunde is the Associate Director, KPMG Advisory Services in Nigeria. Ayotunde has about 13 years experience, consulting experience centered on client-based solutions across multiple industries and market segments, including power, utilities, oil and gas, agriculture, consumer industrial markets, as well as the public sector. He has expertise in people advisory, change management, process re-engineering, organizational restructuring, and of course, everyone's favorite, financial management as well. Second speaker for today, Kolawole Udulami. Kolawole has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. He has a master's degree in energy economics. He's the Assistant Manager Strategy Consultant, PwC Nigeria. He is an expert when it comes to business strategies, tax, and project management. He's a professional with track record in pioneering and leading courses, projects, businesses, and teams in achieving stable and sustainable profitable growth. His master's degree is from the energy, he has a master's degree in energy economics from Emerald Energy Institute. He's also a chartered member of the Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. A few of his recent experiences and publications are also there at the bottom of your screen. He is the co-author, Energy Security and Future of Oil, a PwC publication in a top-tier magazine in Nigeria. Third and final speaker today, Adebola Anofin. Adebola has a master's degree in electronics and computer engineering and is currently engaging in a master's degree in the same subject. So Adebola will be giving us an entrepreneur perspective today on solar integration into the whole energy mix. It's a little different to the presentation you'll be hearing, but when you come to it, you see why I say a little different, and quite exciting too as well. So without much further ado, brief introduction. What we mean when we talk about energy transition and decarbonization. So under the umbrella, as far as the definitions are concerned, decarbonization, what we simply means is reducing or eliminating CO2 from energy sources to achieve net zero emissions, as well as stabilizing greenhouse gases. As part of the transition process, we also hope to we also hope to decentralize. So what by this we mean, limited reliance on few large generation plants and instead transit to smaller power plants generally attached to consumer households. Then also digitalization, and by this we simply mean integrating digital tools into the energy mix as far as power generation, transmission, and indeed on the demand side of things as well. Also, as part of the energy transition process, electrification. So basically what we're saying here is as many sectors as possible, integrate electrification, particularly transport and industry in the urban and rural communities. Last but not least, resilience, because in the face of any transition process, change is difficult, growing pains, as they say. So by resilience here, we're talking about the ability to adapt in the face of the threats to the transition process. By threats, a lot of it could come in the very shape of digitalization, because as soon as you integrate digital technology into the energy mix, as we all know, digitalization, digital tools are susceptible to hacking, other cyber threats. So we need to be resilient and be prepared and not to just phase away easily in the face of all these possible threats. If you want to know more about the subject, as far as transition is concerned, there are a few references there at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can check it out. Okay, next thing, we ask ourselves, why is decarbonization necessary? Why is it necessary? What are the global targets? And indeed, as far as Nigeria and Sub-Saharan Africa is concerned, what are our targets, or what is our current status? So IPCC have mentioned that in order for us to avert a catastrophic climate change situation, greenhouse gases must not exceed 450 ppm CO2e. And to stay within this budget, as far as 2050 is concerned, mid-century, we're expecting to see about 9.2 billion people. And the average per capita emissions that we'll need to avert this catastrophic situation is bordering around 2.1 to 2.6 tons of CO2e. Now, if I draw your attention to the chart or the pictorial image on your screen there, so where my mouse is hovering right now, so that is essentially where Nigeria, Sub-Saharan Africa is. That's Latin America, Oceania, North America, Europe, Middle East, Asia. So comparatively speaking, we're the lowest compared to other continents. However, as we all probably do know, we are, as Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, on the verge of our industrial revolution, and other continents are sort of outsourcing their own industrial side of things. So this balance may soon change, but as far as the whole mix, we're in good stead. But our target is to bring this down from 2.7 down to the IPC recommended 2.1. That's our target, basically. So if you want to know more about this energy mix and IPCC and all of that, the reference is right there at the bottom of your screen. So we talked about the transition process. We talked about a few definitions. Now we'll talk about what are the solutions. Solution one, why we're here today, renewable energy, clean energy. Also, as part of the solutions, carbon offsets, carbon capture and storage, use of hydrogen, use of biomass. Use of hydrogen, use of biomass, carbon capture, storage, carbon offsets, all be part of our next webinar come mid-September. So if you're a professional in this space, you want to add your knowledge to this movement, please by all means do reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Drop us an email, efikos@efikos.co.uk, and please let's indeed have a conversation. So that is it for my brief introduction. I will now pass you across to our first panelist of today. I'm going to stop sharing in a bit. Ayatunde, if you can hear me, you can come off mute and start to share.
Thank you very much, Kola. And good evening, everyone. I hope you can see my screen and you can hear me clearly. Today, we'll be talking about the overview of renewable energy in Nigeria, especially the regulatory landscape and some things around the financials that will be interesting to note for an investor. And thank you to Efikos for giving me the platform to share my views. And I also say welcome to my co-speakers here today. Going in straight into the conversation, it's important for us to know that there's a movement currently with respect to oil and gas. Oil seems to dominate, and it's about 60% of our energy consumption today. But there's a new entrant that is expected to grow over the next 20 years, and that is renewable. We're expecting it to grow at a rate of about 400%. That being said, it means that renewable energy is going to change our lives in many ways. If we look at what is being touted and what is being projected over the next 3 decades, power would account for about 44% of global energy consumption, and renewable energy will be playing a critical role in this mix. If we look at electricity generation, for example, in another 3 decades, we will have about 85% of our electricity generation coming from renewable energy. And we also see similar shifts with respect to transport, energy consumptions in terms of industry, as well as buildings and the way buildings are designed and power is consumed. In terms of the traditional sources of renewable energy fuel, we see today that the hydropower is the one that has about the largest in terms of the mix today. About 19.3% of our renewable electricity in 2009 had a lot of hydropower. Moving into about 2018, we began to see the shift in other sources, solar gaining space, as well as wind power. And that has grown also our renewable energy mix to about 26.2%. Fast forward to some 3 decades to come, we are going to have about 85%, as I've said earlier, but solar and wind are taking center stage in renewable growth into the future. I would not say sad to say, but I'll say there's a big opportunity for us in Africa to begin to grow our renewable power output. Today, we are currently operating at about 46 gigawatts, which is about 2% of global renewable power output, with China, US, Brazil, and Germany leading the pack with respect to renewable power per capita, and also in installed capacity. What is critical for us to understand is that countries that are actually doing well have both the regulations in place as well as, would I say, the political will to implement for their respective countries. Also, we have a global target that we are all working towards, which is UN SDG 7, as well as being part of the Paris Agreement. This is just talking around the global regulatory environment. But bringing it back home to Nigeria, what I would want us to know is that we have about 85% of our electricity generation coming from gas. And this is largely because as a country, we are blessed with the natural resource gas. Like a joke I heard, it says we're a country blessed with gas with sprinkles of oil. But as much as we are blessed with gas, we have over 12,000 megawatts installed capacity. We have very little on-grid renewable energy and utility scale renewable energy installed. And of the over 12,000 megawatts, we generate average of about 3,800 to 4,000 megawatts of electricity. Lending more credence to the fact that we are blessed with gas, when we look at our top 10 projects going into the future, only one of them is a large-scale renewable energy power plant, which is the Mambila hydropower at about 3,000 megawatts. However, there is hope in the horizon. We have a plan, a target, that by 2030, we should have about 30 gigawatts electricity generation capacity, and 10% of that, and 30% of that rather, should be from renewable energy sources. Essentially what we are saying is by 2030, we want to have about 9 gigawatts of electricity coming from renewable energy. But dare I say that if we look at the potential that we can actually generate in the country, we have over 590 megawatts we can generate in the country from our renewable energy sources. And only 9,000 of it is what we are setting as target, which is about 2% of the potential that we can achieve. You know, in situating this, I would want us to see how this plays out, because in the 590 is actually broken down into the various sources, solar being the big player here in terms of the untapped renewable energy potential. And when we look at it, and even though I would like to subtract the current capacity, which is over 2,300 megawatts of renewable energy from our hydro sources, but if we look at the totality of 9,000, we have the potential of generating about 2.3 billion dollars annually in terms of revenue. And this is the gap that is not being generated because we do not have that capacity in place. We have also used the renewable energy feed-in tariff as a basis for calculating this revenue, as it were. But as I said earlier, more instructive is the fact that solar is one of the sources that is going to take center stage. And if we look at our renewable energy potential in Nigeria, as it were, solar takes about 89% of the potential that we have. And it also has one of the lowest investment outlays per kilowatt. If we look at the solar PV, right at about the bottom of the segment tagged number 2, it comes between around $790 to $1,921 per kilowatt. And going beyond that, we see the fact that in terms of a global renewable energy investment, the mix, more of it has been going into the development of solar as against the other sources. Wind comes closely behind. I had mentioned earlier that solar and wind are going to be taking center stage into the future. When we look at the terms of the commercials in Nigeria here, going by the renewable energy feed-in tariff, the solar actually gives us a higher energy tariff compared to the other sources. So this gives us, would I say, two or double-edged benefits. It has the lowest investment outlay per kilowatt, and it has the highest energy tariff per megawatt hour. But if we say, let's put some numbers to it, let's size what these potentials are. If you go into the solar market and you put in a utility scale solar facility at about 100 megawatts, you're looking at an investment outlay of about $162 million with a potential annual revenue of $26.8 million and an annualized ROI of about $1.6 million on your outlay. This is based on some of the engagements we've had with the industry players, and we understand the ranges of their respective ROIs, as the case may be. But every opportunity has got its own challenges. Suffice to say that as we are today, and some of my colleagues will speak to this in the next segment, there is a general grid weakness. So not all of the renewable energy that we bring in can go on grid today. Some would have to go through off-grid and mini-grid arrangements, and while some would go on the grid. We have a bit of bureaucracy that we need to deal with in terms of some delays in getting certain approvals and the likes. As well as, would I say, financing constraints. Generally, we're a bit impatient in Nigeria with capital. We probably use more of short-term capital to finance long-term projects. And then, even though we have a fairly decent tariff, as it were, back at the retail end, there are insufficient end user tariffs currently, although there are certain moves by the federal government to actually implement a new tariff regime, as the case may be. That being said, we just want to quickly go through all the government agencies and regulators that play an important role towards developing renewable energy in Nigeria. I would run through them quickly just because of time. And we have the Federal Ministry of Power that is sitting at the helm of everything with respect to formulating broad policies, coordinating activities within the sector. We have the Federal Ministry of Environment also playing a part with respect to approvals of EIA for power generation. NERC, which is the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, plays more in terms of licensing, the on-grid, off-grid, power distribution pricing, and competition management. The NELMCO have kind of put a different color into it because this largely applies to the successor companies. Rural Electrification Agency plays a very vital role in the fact that they have targets they are working towards in terms of promoting rural electrification, mini-grids, and microgrids. We have the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. This comes particularly for hydropower projects. And one thing is good for us to understand is that in dealing with hydropower projects, especially on the run of the river, there is the need to understand that releasing water for the purpose of agriculture takes precedence over water management in that case. So there needs to be some form of balance that whoever is playing in that sector will do with the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. We have the Energy Commission of Nigeria that's responsible for the strategic planning and coordination of the policies in the field of energy. The bulk electricity trading, Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading, NBET, for bulk purchase of power for those considered utility scale at about 50 megawatts and above, will have to engage and sell their power in bulk to the bulk trader. In terms of the remaining three, they have to do with the respective equipment and the standards. And for raw materials in developing some of this equipment, the Standard Organization of Nigeria, the Raw Materials Research and Development Council, as well as NEMSA, that enforces the technical standards and ensure that every product meets the required specification. In addition to these agencies, we have quite a number of policies as well in the country. And that speaks to the fact that from a regulatory point of view, we seem to be moving in the right direction towards renewable energy, from the master plan to the Renewable Energy Action Plan, the Renewable Energy and Efficiency Policy, as well as the feed-in tariff, which many investors are quite interested in. This comes with a standard 20-year power purchase agreement and offtake for power producers if you fall within what we call the qualifying capacity, as it were. And we also have the Rural Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan. What is important for us to understand is that every of these agency, they have a specific concern, and there's a way we can engage them as investors and as players in the sector. What is important for us is to understand each of their concerns and work towards ensuring that we can address those concerns. In doing this, it's important for every player or operator to do a stakeholder mapping. And with respect to stakeholder mapping, you need to know whatever particular strategy you need to deploy in managing your stakeholder. One stakeholder that I didn't mention as a regulatory agency or government agency is the host community. And the host community plays a very vital role with respect to situating renewable energy projects, mostly because many of those projects that are also going to be utility scale are going to be around the rural areas, and you need to engage the host community extensively. In addition to all of this, we have incentives as well coming from the federal government in terms of import duty exemption on certain items that come in for renewable energy, in terms of investment tax relief, in terms of reconstruction investment allowance, relief for research and development, pioneer incentives, as well as rural investment allowance for those projects that are put in rural areas or that encourage rural electrification, as it were. On the overall, just to summarize, renewable energy will continue to lead the growth of alternative energy sources in the energy mix. We expect that this will continue to grow. Solar and wind, as I had said earlier, will lead the space. In terms of demand, Asia will lead in terms of the demand, and Europe also will dominate, as it were. We have a unique opportunity in Africa to begin to unlock the vast renewable energy potentials that we have in the country. And I hope that as we begin to push in this moment, as we begin to keep the conversation going, we'll be able to attract the right investments into Africa, and we'll also be able to put some certain hard facts on the table for our governments to see the pains of the players and put in policies to mitigate those pains and ensure that the investments that are required go into renewable energy generation over the next 10 to 20 years. Thank you very much. I'll stop at this point and hand you guys over back to Kola.
Okay, thank you very much, Ayotunde. Thank you for that. I was indeed very, it was like I was back in school, quite engaging and very informative. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our next panelist, Kolaole. Kolaole, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Kola. Thank you very much to the Efikos team for having me. And let me say thank you to everyone who has taken our time to join us today. Of course, thank you to my good friend Ayokunle for that wonderful presentation. Always a pleasure listening to you. I will be looking at strategic and technological considerations for decarbonization of energy. And I will start from an African perspective. Now, while the world in general is facing the global energy trilemma, like we call it, of energy security, energy equity in terms of affordability of energy and access to energy and environmental sustainability, Africa is facing what I would call a unique challenge, the African trilemma, which is economic growth, energy access, and environmental sustainability altogether. And let me explain this. As a continent, we need to grow economically in terms of general economic growth, GDP per capita. We need to improve the social stance of our people. That is one challenge we have. And of course, energy access, we need to ensure that there's access to energy in the continent, and to ensure that there's environmental sustainability, both in the short and long run. Now, why this is a trilemma is because to grow the economy, we need energy to drive the growth. And so when you talk of the economic growth and energy consumption nexus, I mean, there have been several schools of thought. Some say energy growth drives energy consumption rather drives economic growth. Some say economic growth drives energy consumption. Others say there is neutrality, and some others say there is a bidirectional causality. But if you look at it very well, you will find that economic growth has to be driven. There has to be, you know, we have to power industries for them to grow. We have to power our offices. You know, the more we work, we will consume those. And if you look at the environmental Kuznets curve theory, you know, it says that really as an economy grows, the effect on the environment in the initial stages is negative. In other words, as you grow, because you consume more energy, right, there will be more environmental impact, negative impact. But at a point, as you further grow, right, you would, the environmental impact of your economic growth becomes less. In other words, it becomes reduced, less of negative environmental impact. And that's because, like I mentioned earlier, you grow, you consume energy, but as you grow as a continent, you then begin to achieve efficiency. In the earlier stages, economic growth is energy intense, but as we grow further, we begin to achieve efficiency. And really, if you look at the energy economic history of every continent, whether it be Europe or whether it be North America, you will find that in their initial stages, you know, they grew, you know, I mean, many of these continents grew by coal before they eventually went on to gas, you know, and then if you look now, they become more efficient, you know, people are consuming less. Now, in Africa, we want to grow. In Africa, we want energy access. But the challenge is, you know, we do not have the time. I know some of us may say that, oh, these guys grew, you know, their economy with coal, so why can't we grow ours with coal, you know, without necessarily, I mean, let's wait till that point when we are grown before we begin to think of sustainability. I once read the book, My Vision by the King of Dubai, and he said something that is very interesting. He said, what developed nations achieved in 100 years, developing nations do not have the luxury of time. We must achieve in 10, if not 20 years. And that's why you've seen that Dubai has scaled up really in growth. So we need not wait till when there's that level of degradation in our environment before we begin to think of energy, environmental sustainability, really. But I just wanted to show you these snapshots. Look at, again, where we are as a nation. There is a 60% electrification gap across the continent. 30% electrification rates, that's a 70% gap in sub-Saharan Africa, and North Africa about 10%. Now this is key. When you look at the political economy of Africa, while Africa is one continent, it's also a bit heterogeneous along regional lines of North Africa, South, Sub-Saharan Africa, and of course along lines of Francophone, Anglophone Africa. And you would always see, mostly you classify North Africa, you know, Middle East and North Africa, because of their proximity to the Middle East, their proximity to Europe, their level of economic development, their level of social development really is mostly higher than the rest of Africa. And bring it home to Nigeria, right? We have 55%, we have 55% electrification gap. In other words, 55% at least of the continent do not have, of the country rather, do not have access to energy. Now that excludes when we begin to talk about people who have what we call bad grid. In other words, they have intermittent supply, maybe 2 hours, 3, 4, 5 hours, or, you know, poor electricity supply as well. Now, juxtapose this with the fact that across the continent, we are blessed with energy resources, you know, over 125 billion barrels of oil reserves, over 527 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves in the continent. So why is it that at the same time we are energy resource rich, we are also energy poor as a nation? And you will see this here. It's because of the general orientation we have in terms of energy is to exploit and export. So you will see that across the continent, only about 38% of our crude is being consumed within the continent, right? While about 53% of our gas is only about 53 is being consumed within the continent. The rest are exported, you know, for exchange, exchange for foreign currency. Now, yes, there are two disadvantages of this. One, we are not using our energy and as a result, we are not powering our industry, and as a result, we're not growing. Secondly, the value addition, the value additive potential of these resources, we are actually not harnessing them. And so, for example, if I sell crude at $50 a barrel to China, I feel like I have made $50. But by the time China refines the crude, by the time China gets petrochemical, the value China will get from that 1 barrel of crude will probably be 4 times more. You know, and that's why in a nation like Nigeria, for example, while oil and gas contributes well over 70%, you know, of foreign exchange, sometimes about 90%, and well over 60% of government revenue, it contributes just about 9 to 10% to the GDP. So these resources are not adding value because we are not domesticating, we are not domiciling, you know, these resources in the continent. And I'm trying to build up a case. So therefore, if we are looking at sustainability, if we are looking at decarbonization, we must look at it from a holistic prism, right? We have resources, we have oil and gas, and we cannot shift away from them. You know, like we would say, we need oil to get out of oil, really. You know, we need oil and gas to get out of oil and gas. We cannot leave these resources because, I mean, it's like leaving cash in the ground. So we want to improve our oil and gas operations and sustainability on one hand. On another hand, we want to deliver stakeholder value both to the people, the government, and of course to investors. You know, those 3 groups of stakeholders, the stakeholder triangle. And of course, we also want to manage the energy transition. So to do all of this, we must then decarbonize sustainably and profitably. And as I wrote on the screen, as important as sustainability and decarbonization are for stakeholders, economies also need to grow and companies need to remain profitable, you know, and attractive to investors. So a successful strategy for decarbonization, therefore, you know, must make conscious choice on sustainability positioning that best reflects stakeholder value and expectations and delivers optimal sustainable impact and investment returns. So we need to consider these 3 buckets, therefore, the 3 buckets of decarbonization and sustainability, and Kola has alluded to them earlier. Net zero. The whole idea of decarbonization is not to have a world without oil. We probably will not have a world without oil, right? And we probably will not have a world where there will be no carbon emissions. But net zero then says there will be carbon emissions, but there are measures put in place. There are other measures that then abate this, because on other ends, we are saving the environment. And so when you look at the carbon emissions and the carbon savings, by the time you net them off, we'll be fine. Majorly, we'll be in a good place as a globe and as a continent and a country. Then new technologies, we need to begin to look at solar. We need to look further at electric vehicles. And as much as we think that these things are not workable, there are Tesla vehicles in Nigeria already, right? Even though, of course, only the rich can afford them at the moment. And the question is, how do you get to charge them? But eventually we will get there. It might not be now, but over time we will get there. And also we need to look at electrification, more of electrification and less of energy consumption. And what does that mean? Like I mentioned, right? When we move to electric vehicles, we'll be using more of electricity to power our vehicles. We'll be using more of electricity to power things that we could have ordinarily used, you know, petrol or petroleum products to power. And of course, yes, you would ask me that we need something to generate the energy or the electricity that we will use to power those vehicles and all of those. But netly, again, it saves us because we are then using this technology, we are then using fossil fuels to do the things that electricity cannot necessarily do. And then we use electricity for the things that, you know, electricity can afford. So we need to look at it again around 8 things. Reduction of emissions, reducing glass flaring, reducing venting, managing carbon footprint, like Kola earlier mentioned about carbon utilization, carbon capture utilization and storage, reduction of waste, enabling circular operations, managing waste, optimizing water usage, and Ayo mentioned earlier about, you know, the fact that in water management, agriculture, you know, takes precedence over electricity generation then. And then carbon offset, we need to develop a carbon marketplace where people can trade, people can get carbon credits. I don't think that these things are far off, you know, because when we say these things, we think, when can we do them in Nigeria? The time to start is now. We do not necessarily need to wait for when the world has left us behind. Rebalancing oil and gas portfolio, and I want to stress on this a bit. Our gas portfolio as a continent needs to be built. Of course, interestingly, currently gas contributes about 39% of the continent's energy, electricity generation. And of course, like Ayo showed us, in Nigeria, gas thermal actually contributes a lot more to electrification in Nigeria. But we need to develop more, and we need to begin to consider non-energy uses of oil. And the reason is because as the world shifts, as the world goes through the global energy transition, there will be less of demand for oil. And so China, Asia, and the rest of the world that demands a lot of our crude will not demand much of it. And so what do we do with the 2 million thereabouts barrels of oil that we produce per day? We need to begin to consider domestic use and non-energy uses, petrochemicals. You know, we need to build all of those. Recently, I read an article about Saudi Arabia. As of 2018, Saudi Arabia had developed a very robust petrochemicals industry using their gas domestically, worth well over, I think, about $6 billion at the last estimates of 2017-18. So we need to, as a continent and as a country, begin to look at that, build new energy businesses, design sustainable products, you know, biofuels for mobility rather than PMS, really, sustainable feedstock, and then managing demand side, behavioral changes. I know many of us, for example, in our houses, who will put on bulbs when we don't need them. And the more of these things we consume, the more we put pressure on the environment, because there will be pressure to generate more electricity, which currently comes a lot more from fossils. And so I've created this to then help us look at, when we're considering technologies in the continent, what do we then need to do? What are the technological options that are available for us, to us as a continent? First is hydro. Did you know that just about 8% of the technically feasible hydro resources in the continent has been harnessed for electricity generation? And we can do more, really, we can do more. And in Nigeria, for example, thankfully, like Ayo mentioned earlier, the Mambila Power Project is going on, and a number of these projects are going on. But there are small hydro projects that we can do here and there. You know, I know, for example, in the north, there is a private electricity generation company, you know, that is doing hydro. And these guys have been since 1929. Surprisingly, many of us won't know them, but those who live up north should know them. And they currently they have installed capacity of about 26 megawatts. And while it's good for them, the fact that, you know, some of their turbines have been installed, some of them since the 1950s, that are still in operations. Now that has brought their capex to literally zero and their cost of generation of energy to very little. However, the challenge, the disadvantage of that for them is that if they had newer turbines, you know, if they had newer technology, right, they would generate more power using the same force, using the same volume of water. So what are we doing? What do we do as a nation to harness this then? High resource availability, very low or minimal environmental footprint, and very affordable levelized cost of energy. And the risk associated with hydro also is also very minimal, highly favorable, and the energy potential is good. Gas, we have abundant gas resources, like Ayo mentioned earlier. We are a continent blessed with gas wrapped in oil. So the resources are available. The environmental footprint is minimal, even though not as favorable as hydro. But how do we use our gas to further generate power at scale? Of course, the grid has been a challenge for us because both at the transmission and distribution level. But how do we then look at, do we begin to empower more people to do IEDNs, independent electricity distribution networks, using gas? And you see, the pathway to decarbonization will come a lot through decentralization. Part of the challenges we have as a country is generation of electricity and, you know, power consumption general is centralized. You know, we need to begin to decentralize, allow for regional grids, allow for grids at state level. And that brings us to solar, for example. A lot is being done in solar. Of course, the challenge of intermittency comes with solar. And when you look at it, solar in itself may not alone, you know, may not be able to serve the continent as a web. But what we need to do then is to say, how do we, you know, have a mix of solar, a mix of gas, a mix of hydro, and how do we further use solar at decentralized level? I mean, I like what the Rural Electrification Agency, REA, is doing in terms of solar projects for rural environments where there's abundant sunshine and all of those. We need to do more, and we need to allow people to use more at home. I mean, I shared with a few friends some time ago how I was somewhere where we were completely off grid generating power for solar, and you wouldn't believe PHCN the disco would still bring estimated bill every month, regardless of the fact that we were not connected to the grid at all in that place. And so how do we ensure that this is encouraged when they should even be giving us credits for generating power on our own and, you know, for what we are doing for the environment? Wind is also very good, even though the levelized cost of energy might not be as favorable as hydro. And then of course, hydrogen. How do we use hydrogen? CCUS. And let me talk a bit about nuclear. No one, of course, wants to hear about the nukes, right? I mean, I learned that Germany has decommissioned their nuclear power plants. It's highly risky, but the environmental footprint is minimal. So while Germany has decommissioned their nuclear power plants, or they are decommissioning a number of them, recently the UAE launched a nuclear power plant that I think is the first in the Middle East, you know, to generate power. Yes, it is risky, but if it can be managed, we can generate power at utility scale with nukes, even though everyone is scared of the nukes. But what I am saying all in all is, looking at all of this technology, I think that for utility scale generation and also decarbonization, hydro is the low-hanging fruit, combined with gas and doing a lot more with solar. And I think that the way forward should be decentralization. Allow the North, for example, you know, generate more power from solar. Down South, where there's abundance of gas, let there be more generation of power from gas. Let's decentralize power generation to allow more power, you know, to allow energy access that would eventually help our economy growth, and of course, at a scale or in a manner that will further help decarbonization and have minimal impact on the environment. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Kolawole. That was a good journey to be a part of. And it's interesting you mentioned the comparison to some European countries, and more importantly, it's good that professionals like yourself are looking inward to see what solutions actually best work for us as part of, you know, sub-Saharan Africa. What works best for us, as opposed to just trying to mirror what other countries have been doing. So yeah, interesting times, and like you rightly said, there's a lot of potential, especially in the solar space, and Ayotunde mentioned that as well. So I'm glad there's, you know, all thoughts are sort of synchronized, and hopefully this is just the beginning of good things to happen for Nigeria, and indeed major parts of the continent as well. So we have two panelists that have done their bit. We have our third and final speaker. So Adebola, are you ready so that we can get your part going? You can come off the mute so that we can get this started.
Hi, Kola.
All right, good. So I'm just going to share my screen, then we'll get this. Okay, so 1 second. Let me just go in presentation mode. Flip through all of this. Just bear with me a second, people. Okay, so do you mind turning, is your video on, Debola, because I can't see you. All right, good. Okay, so as I mentioned before, this part of the webinar, it's more like an interview type section. And so I'll be putting some questions to Debola, and he's going to be responding. He's done his slides, and a lot of the information is already on the screen, but we're going to try and talk through it. You guys will understand as we go along. So Debola is the principal consultant for White Consults Limited. They're an energy and ICT based company in Lagos, Nigeria. And he's here to share his view as far as a lot of the things the guys have talked about. As you appreciated, the guys that have spoken before are consultants. And now we have somebody from the other side of the divide, the actual entrepreneurs who actually go in, knocking on doors, like doing these installations. We wish to have their perspective as well. So I guess the first question I want to put across to yourself, Debola, is what were the primary drivers for you guys establishing White Consult in the first place?
Thank you, Kola. I must say big kudos to Ayotunde and Kola Wale. They've really done justice to the decarbonization energy discussion. For us at White Consult, our primary driver for establishing White Consult was basically to orientate and also to create a sort of, should I say, a green ecosystem, where an ecosystem whereby we can have something that is devoid of noise and air pollution, an ecosystem whereby we can have other worries about our health, but of course not from carbon emission, and then we can also have something whereby we have a sustainable source of power supply. Because when you look at the journey so far, it's sort of shameful that the giant of Africa, as we so acclaimed to call ourselves, we can't boast of steady power supply. And if the government is not ready to do something, then we individuals should be able to take up such things on our own and see how we can move ourselves forward, both as an individual, as a team, as a community, as a mini state, and at large, as a nation.
Thanks for that, Debola. So I noticed on your presentation, you've done a sort of comparative costs between running a 1 kVA generator, popularly referred to as a pass my neighbor, or some people say I better pass my neighbor, you know, depending on what you lean towards. But yeah, you've done a comparative analysis between the running and purchase cost of the 1 kVA generator versus the solar inverter equivalent solutions. So can you just speak a little bit more on this, please, if you don't mind?
Okay, so if you look at it, the 1 kVA generator, which is a pass my neighbor generator, as it's fondly called or thereabout, is the commonest type of generator you have in Nigeria. When you look at the large population of masses who use such generator sets, that's why I'm using that as for typical analysis in this case. Now, when you look at the screen, which I believe everyone can see, the running cost and also the maintenance cost of their pass my neighbor generator when compared to the solar inverter, the margin could be relatively small when you're looking at it from the cost margin. But we want people to look at it from the public health angle of it. Now, even if the margin is quite close, what of the public health angle of it? What are the damages this thing does to your health? You know, we say there's a saying that says life is fleeting. You may look healthy, but you might be at risk of several forms of pollution, air pollution, the noise pollution. And if you look at it, if you look into it, there's an analysis that also says that about 2/3 of users of this generator set suffer from hearing impairment, either knowingly or unknowingly. So all these things are things we are trying to say that don't just look at the cost. Unfortunately, the black man looks at the cost before his health. But we need to start looking beyond that. One good instance is this pandemic, which we are just trying to recover from. The pandemic has taught us that we should place more value on our health as much as we place on our pockets. Thank you.
It's interesting you mentioned public health, and those numbers, I mean, they're quite humbling when you look at it. Like, even though speaking honestly and personally, I've seen this slide of yours before, but even just looking at it, when you're looking at it from the perspective, this is actually people. 1,500 related carbon monoxide and generator related deaths per year, 70% increased risk of lung cancer. And like you mentioned, hearing impairments. I mean, people say it as, in form of a joke that maybe that's the reason why as Nigerians, we are very loud, because we have to talk over the sound of, powerful generator sets all the time. So it is kind of almost like integrated its way into our culture, but maybe that's a story for another day. But yeah, interesting facts. So for anybody who wishes to know more and about where these references have come from, those numbers on the screen, that's it at the bottom of your screen right there if you want to make reference at your own personal time. You have something called personal disclosure that you put that bullet point right there. Can you just speak more on so that the audience can see what you're trying to talk about, please, Debola?
Well, about the personal disclosure, I always want to put this out because whenever I have the opportunity to speak to the public, or to speak to some group of people, I always want to let them know that there's a disability, there's an ability in disability. I, as a person, I go about my daily activities using a wheelchair, and that has not in any form limited me. It has, in fact, I must even say that it has moved me to do more. It has moved me to do more in terms of my professional field. It has moved me to do more in terms of my support to other people who also have such challenges or similar things. It has also moved me to also orientate people more as regards taking their health serious, like this decarbonization of a thing. It's also something you need to look at because challenges comes in different forms. We mentioned earlier, we talked about hearing impairments. If we keep going the way we're going with this old generator set blaring everywhere, especially a case study of Lagos, where most times when you come to most cities in Lagos, most part of Lagos, you see that from 7 p.m. till about 10 p.m., every nook and cranny generator is running. This is hazardous to the health. We mentioned hearing impairment earlier. It's a challenge. It's a physical challenge. So that's that about the personal disclosure.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. And there are messages of support coming in from our audience members who I'm sure, like your story, like you rightly said, will serve as inspiration for a lot of people out there, especially amongst the younger generation, because they need as much encouragement as they can be afforded. Moving on, we on the second slide, you have a hashtag, or you had a hashtag Power256 Homes. Can you just speak a little bit more about this, please?
Okay, Power256 Homes is a set target for us in our orientation campaign of getting more people to key into alternative forms of power supply. We set it at Power256 Homes during one of our analysis sections. We're looking at how many people we can actually convert in a 365 days calendar. So during the analysis, we found out that we can actually hit a target of 256 comfortably. And then we decided to kick into that. And that was how the hashtag Power256 Home came about. The hashtag is all about the digital space. The hashtag is we have it in form of physical prints, t-shirts, face caps. Whenever we put this thing on, even when people approach us and they're like, oh, what is this hashtag about? We're able to still orientate them, and then this draws their awareness into this decarbonization and also a green ecosystem. And it's really been very, 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 very successful. We've grown on it. I make bold to say that at the moment we have over 750 clients on our clientele list, and it's really been nice to get people to key into this thing.
Very, very interesting. And you mentioned that you plan to scale up to 1,000 homes and SMEs by actually end of this year. That's a few more months. Are you close to achieving your target, would you say?
yes, I must say that we're close to hitting the 1,000 mark. As much as the bad things also has a good side. When there's a pandemic, when the recent pandemic has forced people to work more from home, and when you work from home, you don't want to take chances of relying on the main grid. You don't want to disturb your neighbors during the day running generator set. So this has also helped us to scale up our numbers. As much as we might look at it from the profit angle, we're also looking at it from the campaign angle, which is the angle of getting people to look away from the generator sets and look towards alternative means of power supply, which in this case we're focusing on solar inverter supply. So I must say, yes, we are on the toe of hitting a 1,000 mark, and I can say that with the recent partnership we're looking at from one or two organizations, because we're looking at a way whereby we will still talk about it. If you look at the cost of acquiring the typical package most people go for, when you look at the cost of this package, it's quite on the high side at the moment because of the pandemic that has really eaten to people's budget, that's really eaten into the economy, and the purchasing power is a bit low. But with the partnerships we're looking at, that's going to afford people with the opportunity to pay in installments and comfortable installments with little or no, with less interest rates. So with all this support coming from organizations left and right, and also from investors who are also coming in to team up with us in actualizing this campaign, with all this support left, right, and everywhere, I'm sure that by the end of the 2020 calendar year, we would hit 1,000 mark or even exceed it. Thank you.
That's good. That's actually quite good and impressive too. And the latter part of what you explained sort of segues into the next question I was going to ask you, which was access to funding, as part of the challenges. And audience members, if you can see the screen, he's already listed out a couple of bullet points that he reckons are potential showstoppers to both his organization and other people competing in the same space. One of which is the access to funding or loans for entrepreneurs. Can you speak a bit more about this? Just expand a little. I know you touched on it already, but do you mind expanding a little on this, please?
Okay, when you talk about access to funding for entrepreneurs, it is one key thing I think we need to look into for us to grow this renewable energy sector. Because when you look at the cost of acquiring all these items, they're quite on the high side. No singular entrepreneur can single-handedly handle all these things. And then when you look at the purchasing power also, purchasing power is a bit low. We're just recovering from pandemic. So access to funding will go a long way. And I want to also say this publicly. Anyone who is out there who is looking to invest into any sector in Nigeria, I think the energy sector at the moment is one good sector to invest in. It is a sure banker that Nigeria cannot, with the present system we have in place, we cannot have an 100% main grid power supply running 24/7. So people are going to look into alternative options. So access to funding is key. The government is doing its own fair share, but I must say that most of these things the government is doing, 70% of it is just in the public space. It does not really go around. In fact, when it even says if people are benefiting from it, you hardly pinpoint one or two people who is benefiting from this thing. There are about 2 or 3 societies of that is made up of people who are into renewable energy field, and you ask these members, have you really benefited from this funding? And they all go mute. Mm-hmm. So it calls for concern, and it also calls for private individuals to key into. This is an area they need to look towards. And then I also want to say that, you see, another challenge that expands on with this access to funding is local production. When there's access to good funding, we can actually produce locally. Although we have other things that affect local production, which we would probably touch on during this section. But I mean, access to funding goes a long way, because when you produce locally, your ROI becomes wider than what you're looking at when you import. So that's it.
Oh, it's interesting you mentioned local manufacture, because even though I appreciate that will be where we should be targeting ourselves as far as being able to manufacture and produce a lot of the materials locally, At the moment, we are, however, in a unique situation where, because we need materials now, so obviously we are relying on imports, but it's good that you mentioned it, that the long-term view is we need to be able to sustainably, manufacture and consume what we actually do manufacture locally, because we have the numbers. You also, and this is going to be the last bullet point I touch on this slide, poor quality products. Whilst we're on the subject of imports and everything, let's talk about poor quality products. Speak more on that, please.
Our substandard product is one thing that affects every sector in this country at the moment. But I would want to focus on the energy sector. Poor quality product has actually made our campaign very difficult, because when you're saying someone should key into a new terrain, and then the person's neighbor is sharing bad experience not because the technician is not capable, bad experience not because the engineer is not capable, but because, one, access to funding to the right people. When the right people don't bring in the right products, it becomes an issue, because the void will be left for the wrong set of people who have this money within them to bring in low quality products focused on their own personal gain. And it is what is available in the public market that the engineer out there, or the technician, as the case may be, is going to use for his installation. So poor substandard and poor quality import is really something that we need to pay keen attention to in this country. The earlier speaker talked about the different board agencies who are into regulation of all these things. We need to tax these agencies to do more. They need to do more. They need to do more. SON needs to do more. NEMSA needs to do more, and all of them. And also the engineering bodies too. They need to do more. They need to get more involved in all these things. You don't just go about saying you're an engineer. You just don't go about saying you belong to the Society of Engineers, and then that is just where it ends. You need to look more into other areas of your field, because when you don't look more into other areas of your field, it ends up affecting you, who is at the end of the chain. Lots of those things. You have the government tariff when you don't look into it. You have the politics when you don't look into it. You have the administrative rules when you don't look into all these things. It goes a long way to affect the end products you get to use for your project, which is one of the things we face in this line of, it's one of the challenges we face in this line of our work.
Interesting. I'm getting a couple of quick questions from the audience members regarding the images on the screen. So if you don't mind, the image on the bottom top right-hand corner and top right-hand corner showing the blue and the green bits, can you just explain what these materials or devices are, if you don't mind, Debola?
Okay, where the cursor is actually hovering around, the everything as a whole is called the inverter system. Or well, let's say it's called the power inverter system without the solar integrated into it. It's called the power inverter system. Now, the inverter system is made up of, power inverter system is made up of two things, the inverter and then the batteries. So if you look at the top part of the rack, meanwhile, the housing is called the rack. The top part, that black box, is an inverter. That's what they call inverter. People in diaspora might not know what it is. Especially for those that have left, maybe that have left motherland in the early days, they might be wondering what was an inverter. It looks strange to them because it was not so bad when they left, but now it's become so bad. Power has become something that's it never expect power always. It has gone beyond always. It is never expect power. Anytime. It's no more always. It's anytime. So the black box you're looking at there is the inverter. And then the blue ones, the tall blue ones, tower images you're looking at, those are the batteries. So this type of battery is a wet cell battery, otherwise known as tubular batteries. These are the batteries that uses electrolytes. You need to change the content in the battery after a little while. It has a gauge which you monitor. So the more your load, the more your consumption, the more the electrolyte burns down. So after a little while, you need to call in your technician or your engineer, as the case with your service providers for general for. You need to call in these people to help you run a maintenance on it, so they do a top up and all that. So that's for the system looking at. Like I said, it's a power inverter. If solar is not integrated into it, power inverter because it is dependent upon the main grid as its lone source of charging. So for you to charge this type of system now, you need just the main grid, or in some cases, you could use a generator to support it. So let me quickly touch down before I go to the next image. Let me quickly touch down that, you see, another thing is whenever you're looking at doing a solar, you're looking at of getting a solar energy solution, you should always go for someone who is technically inclined in this thing, because the cost of these things are not, they don't come in cheap. They are good investments, but of course we all know no investment comes in cheap. No one who wants to invest will invest little and will be expecting a good ROI. If you want to do a good investment, you know it doesn't come in cheap. So we also have to go for a good service provider who is very keen in project management and who is very fast in his technical skills. So if you look at this system now, I mentioned that it's a power inverter. Power inverter in the sense that someone who's going to apply this kind of system to his facility or to his home, as the case may be, would be someone who enjoys power supply from the main grid to a reasonable number of hours. So what I'm saying now is this: if you are having power supply from let me say for a reasonable amount of 8 hours, and then your sole aim of the alternative energy supply is to use it at night, probably when you return from work, then a power inverter is just fine for you. You don't need to go all out going for a solar inverter. So that helps you manage your project. So that is one of the things we do at White Consult. We are project managers. It's one of the things we do. We recommend a suitable system for you that fits in accordingly, except if you now want to go overboard, that is understandable. So like I said, the above system is a power inverter, and it's for someone who has a reasonable hours of power supply, who just needs something to complement what he has or what the person has, as the case may be. So that is that about the first system. And it is also what the second panelist spoke on, that, you know, we need a little bit of all this mix to get a decarbonized environment. A little bit of the main grid, a little bit of hydro, a little bit of solar. But in this case, because the hydro is not something that an individual can key into, with solar energy, a little bit of it, if you have up to 6 hours of power supply, instead of you now running generator sets, you know, when we talked about the cost earlier, the average person will just look at the random cost and then it's off. It says this thing, there's just little margin. I wouldn't go for it. But when you look deep at it, now you're paying for mains power supply. The PHCM would bring their ridiculous bill from estimated bill, and you're able to get 6 hours of power supply. This system would have charged up by that 6 hours. And this system will, in return, give you a minimum of 10 hours power supply. So if you look at that, I think that's a good investment for you, because the PHCN has done the little job, and then instead of you now running your generator set, double cost, double instant cost, the inverter system you have in place just takes over that. So that's for the system you have above. The system you have below is for someone who wants to scale big, both in terms of hours of power supply and also in terms of essential load. Let me quickly point out that the system above, the black box, is a 2.4 kVA, is a typical thing for most homes, or a 2 kVA as the case applies. And then the one below is a 3.5 kVA. It's actually there to address both the essential load of that individual and also the hours of power supply of the individual. Then the batteries you're looking at, they are SMF battery. SMF points at sealed maintenance-free batteries. So what they're saying is that those batteries do not need any form of maintenance. It's just a one-off. You install and then you're good to go. All you need to just do is take precautionary measures and voila. Thank you.
Wow. As I can see, the message boards are firing up. Like you've really, put people to the test. They're like sending all messages out. We'll get as many as we can answer. We'll accommodate, but please, by all means, if you still have more questions, please send them in. There's a lot of questions I'm seeing right now, but please continue to send them in, and I'm sure our panelists are eager to answer them. So just before we wrap this segment up, you have some case studies. And actually, before we might talk about the case studies, you talked about the fact that PHCN will probably give you about 5 to 6 hours, and you can use that 5 to 6 hours to now power your batteries for your alternative energy. And it's funny how that whole thing is now coming about, because what we're talking about as part of the transition process, or a good mix, is you have and probably a few of the European countries are starting to adopt this model, or a few private estates. You have main grid power supply for maybe 12 hours of the day, and then it's now switches over to an alternative power source. So that gives that first power source 12 hours of rest time. Do you know what I mean? Like, so in sense, like you avoid system redundancy at every point that you are allowing for, systems to be able to be maintained, and it just gives a healthy balance of things. So whilst we can't give PHCN the credit for saying, oh, we intentionally went about denying power so that people can, find alternative energy, but it's funny, like the whole thing just sort of works itself out in that way. So yeah, sorry for the segue, but yes, your case studies. You have one case study for individual homes. Can you just speak more on this? I know you touched on it previously, but just expand on the individual homes case study that the audience can see on the screen there.
Oh yeah, thank you, Kola. For the individual homes, I had already mentioned something of that nature earlier.
Okay, yes, you actually did. My mistake. So let's look at case study 2. No, but actually for case study 1, it's that costs 750,000 naira. And that is a one-off purchase cost. If am I right in assuming that?
Yes, that's a one-off purchase cost.
Yeah, that's one-off purchase cost. Okay, let's go to case study 2, the mini grid. Can you speak more on the mini grid, please, Debola?
Okay, so what we're saying, like what you said earlier, we're simply saying that if you have a situation whereby, you mentioned something about some countries, some European countries, and then you talked about how they have the mini grid and how they integrate both into each other. What we are saying now is this. People who are in Nigeria, say, let me use Lagos and Abuja as a case study.
Okay.
They are already deploying some mini estates in Lagos at the moment. And these mini estates, they are being powered by central generator sets. This central generator set now has, let me say, it has a it supplies power to all the homes in that mini estate. But this is only addressing one part. So they do say to those people that you don't have to bring in your personal generator. All you need to just do is to just bring in your normal thing. Then the estate supplies you with the central generator. But this is only addressing one part of the pollution. This is addressing the noise part. Central generator still burns carbon. It's still not an eco-free system. It's not still that green system we are looking at. There's a hoax about Bill Gates and the present pandemic, because the man has been talking about this thing before now. So they are saying this man probably knows about this thing. But what we are saying now is this. We are saying this same man has come out to say that we need to protect our climate. We need to take care of our climate. And these things are happening before us. We might not just be saying them. These things are happening before us already. At the moment now in Nigeria, we've not had rainfall. We've had little or no rainfall, which is very unusual. So if we keep going the way we're going, burning carbon into the air, our climate keeps getting damaged. And this affects us in return. And this is where the public health thing comes in play. Because at the moment now, we are being affected when there's no rain, when there's no rainfall. Some farmers are being affected. When farmers are being affected, it affects our crop, it affects our feeding. This is public health. So what we are saying in this second case study is that if case study 1, a 2 kVA system like we have in the image we're looking at, if that is being deployed on a large scale into a 1,000 units housing, if that is being deployed into a 1,000 units housing on a large scale, we can actually have a decentralized alternative power system. Instead of us having that big generator providing alternative power supply to that mini estate, we can actually have something of an alternative power supply being powered by a solar inverter. And it can go on a minimum scale. It can also go on a large scale, as huge as the 1,000 RC units or even more. And the investment we're looking at in this whole thing is not something that is not even affordable. It is very affordable. When you look at the case study one, the average cost of this thing is on the high side, 750,000. So if you have it's 1,000 units, that's about 7 million. So with 7 million, a mini estate will completely enjoy an eco-free system with little or no carbon emission. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. You know, I like, see, for me personally, I always like it when money is attached to anything because it offers perspective. So that brings us to the end of this part of the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing for a bit, and I'm going to copy a few questions from the audience members over. Other panelists, can you guys come back online, turn your audios and your videos on, and let me just give me a second. I'm just going to copy a few things over. Whilst that is going, I'm doing that. I'm just going to read out a particular comment. It's not a question, it's more of a comment. So whilst you guys answer or respond to that comment, we'll just take it. I think I'll direct this at Kolawole. The question is, or the comment is, I would like to add that in addition to generation of CO2 due to lack of decarbonization, we currently use biomass, in other words, firewood, for over 60% of our cooking, which forms a major part of our domestic energy consumption. We have a situation where our gas in Europe and Asia allows them to protect their biomass while we are cutting down our trees at an unsustainable rate. The result is, you know, we're killing our, you know, we're creating deserts really, because we're, you know, as far as I think Kolawole, you mentioned the whole thing about trying to balance as far as the whole carbon offset, carbon trading, and part of it is actually planting of trees and all of that. But we are kind of doing the opposite, and that's the comment the Mohammed is actually making. So sorry, Mohammed, I should have mentioned the comment was coming from you earlier. And the reduction in available fertile land is a huge has huge socio-economic implications for an expanding economy and population. So Kolawole, can you just speak a bit more on the comment Mohammed just put across whilst I copy the other comments over? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mohammed. I mean, your questions, your comment is very apt. Currently, if you look at our primary energy mix, right, biofuels, biomass contributes a very large percent, really. I think almost about over 50 to 70%. And that's, of course, because it's used for cooking. Even many of the bakeries around, you'll be shocked, right? Most of people buy agege bread, buy all of these. These bakeries use firewood. And so remember that I mentioned about biomass. Sadly for us as a continent, biomass is mostly firewood, felling, and all of that, right? Whereas we can actually go to the good parts of biomass and biofuels by actually looking, for instance, at waste that we can, you know, transform for power generation sustainably. What do I mean? So rice husk, sugarcane peels, palm husk, and all of those. And if you, for example, if you go to Niger State, where they plant rice, where they plant sugar a lot, or if you go to Ebonyi, where rice is their staple, and they have a lot of rice, you will see heaps of waste from rice that can be easily used to generate power, as it were, right? And that's what we should be doing, rather than allowing the felling of trees, you know, indiscriminately. You know, there's something, for example, that New Map is trying to do, encourage the use of LPG. But you see, the challenge majorly for people, for example, when in terms of LPG, it's about scale. Did you know that actually LPG is cheaper than kerosene in Nigeria? If not, it's about the same price or cheaper. But herein is the problem. For you to use LPG, right, you need to buy mostly you need to buy in bulk. So you need to buy a 12 kg, or they're even smaller packs these days, 4 or 5 kgs, right? Now, for the poor man on the street, for him, he doesn't have the upfront capital of 3,500 to buy 12 kg LPG. And so he'd rather go in the evening, buy a small bottle of kerosene at 100 naira or 200 naira to cook. So for him, with 700 naira, he buys kerosene 100 naira or 200 naira, he buys spaghetti and all of that is fine. But in the village, right, and that's what they do. But because LPG is actually cheaper when you look at it at per liter level. But then because of that initial capital one, and then of course, I mean the five A's of access when you talk about affordability, availability, and appeal. You know, some people even still have the mindset. There are landlords in Lagos that have actually learned, because we did some extensive work for New Map sometime last year. I've actually learned that there are some landlords in Lagos that will not allow you use gas cooker because they believe it's more dangerous.
Really?
Yes, than kerosene stove. Did you know, I mean, even all of us on this call, many of us will tell you that jollof rice cooked with firewood is sweeter than jollof rice. So there are those mindset issues, you know, things we need to deal with. Appeal, it's just a fad, maybe because, okay, the smoke, you know, comes in and we feel that the smoke has a taste, but really jollof rice is jollof rice, right? So what I'm saying is that there's a lot. It's sad that felling of trees is being allowed indiscriminately. The government is trying to do stuff, but we need to go beyond lip service. We need to, you know, make LPG available everywhere. And of course, in that area, infrastructure, you know, infrastructure is very key, right? There has to be infrastructure to ensure that LPG is available in remote areas, right? There has to be places that sell. Of course, now we're looking at the MDC, micro distribution centers model, some people are doing, and that's a huge opportunity in case there's any investor. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not giving professional advice, but I'm just saying that that market is ripe and can be easily tapped if you can do a lot of bulk breaking. And let me cite a case study as I round this up. And the thing about bulk breaking is this: generally, people like to buy things in bits. If you know the case study of the milk industry, for example, I mean, one of the things that Cowbell did to win that industry, really, right, one of the things that Cowbell did to win that industry was to start selling Cowbell milk of 5 naira, 10 naira, while Peak and Dano were selling, you know, their big cans and all of that. And they came into the industry because milk before then was big man's food, right? But they started selling Cowbell of 500 naira. And even those of us back then, when we were going to school, you buy one, you leak, you know, you could drink a cup of tea, your gate man could drink tea because of Cowbell. And someone else even did it. These guys, I mean, back in the days, we only knew Jik was the only bleach. Until IPO came with bulk breaking, they were selling bleach of 10 naira. I mean, if you're not in Nigeria, you may not know. And then when they came in, they were selling, people started buying. And now IPO has taken the market. So someone needs to bring that strategy effectively, really, to the LPG space. I can see people typing and saying, no, sir, jollof rice is not jollof rice.
Do you know, you walked right into that, and I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to save you on that. And so we have a lot more questions to get through, but I couldn't get into this question without addressing that Cowbell thing. And it's interesting. For me, I thought all this while it was the jingle that made Cowbell a success. You know, the whole Cowbell, our milk. I just like that tune. So for me, I thought that was why it was a success. Yeah. But hey, so back to decarbonization and away from milk. So I think I'd take this first question. I'll address it to Ayotunde. It's about end user pricing. Do we have indicative figures good enough to entice investors? Ayotunde, can you take that question, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll answer yes and no. Reason I'll answer yes is this. On paper, we have the renewable energy feed-in tariff, dates back as far as 2015, and it gives us quite a comfortable position with respect to the tariffs for renewable energy. And as I presented earlier, solar being the highest in terms of about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. So with that in mind, that seems very justifiable because it has factored in the capital cost. It has factored in the return on the investment, as well as the fixed and operating maintenance costs. So all of that is built into that tariff. So it's quite a good investment when you look at it, when you see the tariffs that are touted in the renewable energy feed-in tariff. However, in the implementation of these is where some things have broken down. Now, this is 2020. Ordinarily, we should have added about 1,050 megawatts of renewable energy from solar from about 10 or 11 players, some of them Canadian, some of them German and the likes. They had even lower than the price in the refit. They had quoted 11 cents per kilowatt hour. Wow. And then somebody in the government space, for some strange reason, who seems to understand that a particular costing mechanism in another region applies completely and 100% to Nigeria's costing mechanism, decided to throw it back to those players that they have to match a lower tariff at which it doesn't make any economic sense to the investors. And then we don't have that solar investment today. And those were supposed to be on-grid solar investments. But the brighter side is this. There is opportunity at the mini-grid and off-grid investment horizon, because we did a study and it was presented to me by the special advisor on infrastructure that in actual fact, a lot more people in the rural areas pay more per kilowatt hour for electricity than we do in the city.
No way.
Whilst they may not use it in the scale at which we do in the city, but the per unit cost is more in the rural area than in the city. And this was done specifically with coverage in the northern parts of the country. And we see those kinds of things. There were arguments that, oh, it's there people from the city that are funding that kind of lifestyle. But hey, whoever has the investment in there has put it there, and it's being paid for. So it's a good place to be if you are going slightly off the grid. However, if you're going also on the utility scale, there is the provision for you to actually sell 50% to the grid and 50% to the DISCO. The DISCO is where, distribution companies, electricity distribution companies, that is where you can also fairly put your foot on the ground and get good prices for your investment, or tariffs rather, for your investment. So that would be my response to that question.
Okay, thank you for that, Ayatunde. I'm going to put the next question to Debola. Debola, there's been a bit of talk about unfair tariffs on solar panels. And I guess you as an investor and entrepreneur, you have your own thoughts on this. So what do you think about the talk generally surrounding unfair tariffs on solar panels? Debola?
Well, I think the man has to sell the way he buys. That's the summary. Now I will expatiate on that. The government is one key player in provision of power supply. But unfortunately, this same government is the reason why we experience all this unfair pricing. What is the government doing as regards import duty on renewable energy items? We're just coming out of a pandemic, and the government has just increased the import duty on a few items, and renewable energy is included. This is a country where we are from level 14 officers in the government agencies down to level 7 working from home.
When you say people are working from home, do you have 24 hours power supply to give to them? No, you don't. So these people are relying on alternative source of power supply. But I mean, they can't even key into this thing because the rates are so high. So I think to cushion the effect of all these things, the government needs to probably create some form of waiver or a reduced tariff. This
Okay.
will help and go a long way, and we can actually reduce the disparity in prices of this thing. And it also boils down to the challenge I mentioned earlier, which we talked about substandard products. When people want to maximize profits, they have to compromise. So that's why
I'm gonna
that's it.
bring
Thank you.
in Ayotunde back to talk on this because I believe Ayotunde, if I remember correctly, you had a section of your presentation. I think you mentioned it was 5% on imports of solar panels. Is my quote right, Ayotunde? 5%?
Yes. But I also have to caveat that
Okay.
we are in a very interesting administration. There are all sorts of interpretations to those policies, as it were. And this is coming from my engagement with the likes of Debola and other industry players. They expect that in the spirit of the policy, that the 5% is what is going to be placed on all the would I say the main component and the subcomponents of the renewable energy investment. However, you can't bring in solar panels and not have storage. And you get 5% on solar panels, but you don't enjoy the same on a very critical component that complements the solar panel, which is storage, which makes the price of this thing go a lot higher and out of reach of the, would I say, the masses, the types that Akolawole was talking about,
Yeah.
So we have those kinds of issues that we need to bring to the fore and discuss with the players and regulators and the government agencies. Yes, the 5% is there, but we need to go for if truly we want to ensure that we, on the first part, decarbonize. In one of the A's that Akolawole mentioned, affordability, and also the other acts, we must be able to make these things standardized and available to all. So we still have those kinds of differentials in the import duties and the import tariffs that we see on renewable energy components.
Thanks for that, Ayotunde. It's good to always for the audience members, this is one of the reasons why selection on the panel, we kind of want to have very diverse views. So because the whole purpose of this segment is the engagement, because for people who are policymakers and part of the policy making process, the likes of Ayotunde and the likes of Kolawole as well, we need to be able to pitch them side by side with the business entrepreneurs and indeed consumers. So if by mentioning consumers, if there's any member of the audience, if you are a consumer, if you are currently in Nigeria and you have your own independent power, either something that you solely put together yourself, or you're part of a mini estate, as in the example that Debola gave earlier. If you want to speak a little bit about this, so that we get a consumer perspective, just indicate. I can give you quick audio and video access, so you can just share your thoughts with us if you are so inclined. But we'll move on. I'm being prompted by some of our guys in the back that we're pressed for time, so I'm going to try and speed ahead. I'm going to direct a question from Ahis. I'm going to put that to Kolawole. How do we ensure that LCOE is progressively reducing over time? Can we show a decline over time to incentivize stakeholders? Kolawole, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, thank you. I think technology in general becomes, well, typically should become more affordable over time with use. So, I mean, when you come up with a new innovation generally, um, at the onset rather, it's expensive, right? But the more people use, the more you achieve scale, right? You generally would have cost reducing or cost declining as well. But one of the things that governments needs to do, I am not particularly a fan of subsidy, but I'm a fan of incentivizing with things like, for example, tariff rebates and all of those. And like Ayo has mentioned, Ayo today has mentioned the challenge with, the implementation of the solar, the tariffs, the import duties on solar. Did you know it's also the same thing for metering, for example, right? Guys in the metering industry, particularly the local manufacturers, are having issues. They are loggerheads literally with customs. And what's the issue? The policy says that for importation of components for the domestic production of meters, right, they are supposed to get import duty waivers. And when rubber hits the road, these guys import components. The custom officials say to them that you have not been able to sufficiently demonstrate, right, that these are raw components. These components look to me more like they have already been produced and you're probably just repackaging them here. So how do we ensure that there's no policy capture? There's no policy somersault across board. So progressively, and like, just to say a bit about solar too, did you know that actually guys domestically who are producing solar panels? I mean, you have these guys in Alaba. For example, there's even a guy that is doing quite well, Oxano Solar, is producing solar domestically. Fine, you may say solar panels, you may say that, they are substandard and all of that. The question for me is, how did China start? Some years back, many of us would not use Chinese products because we considered them substandard. But because their government supported them, their people bought what they produced, and over time they became more proficient, and now they are doing good. In fact, most of the solar panels that are coming from China across the globe, even guys in Germany are buying Chinese panels. That's the truth, right? Because they are, and the cheap does not necessarily mean, or less expensive does not necessarily mean low quality any longer. One of the things that makes things less expensive for them is that they have cheap labor, right? And they have, they have government support. So I think that over time, the more we use this technology, the more we allow them to blossom, there will be a decline, as it were. But the right support has to come from the government, and of course, people also have to patronize.
Thank you for that, Kolaole. I was going through, so I was able to copy some of the questions. A lot of these questions also were emailed to us from would-be attendees. So we received some of these questions in advance as well. But there's a particular question, unfortunately, because I'm presenting, I can't copy it over, but I'm going to read it. And it's a similar question to what Olabi had mentioned in the second part. So both questions, I'm going to read them out, and the first person that I want to take that will be Debola, and then Ayatunde, if you can sort of just follow him behind. I'm going to read, just give me a sec, I'm going to read Olabi's one first. Solar power use isn't totally environmentally safe. The materials used to produce photovoltaics are mined. And I guess where he or she is heading to or speaking from is mining is not involved in this process of manufacture of this photovoltaics. So basically, you already have one sort of mark against solar panels based on their mode of manufacture. Then secondly, he goes on to say, or she goes on to say, amongst the compounds found in solar panels is cadmium, I hope I'm saying that right, Labi, and lead, which are extremely toxic metals. It is imperative for African governments to know this so that more is done by way of recycling or safe disposal, especially considering the quality of some imported panels. So it's sort of like a comment and as well as a question. And I'm going to try and read out Palumi's question, because Palumi sends a question that is quite similar to that. And if I can just read that real quick, let me look for that. So yes, she says, or he says, so there has been a lot of talk about the disadvantages of oil and gas, which is the generation of carbon dioxide. But we have looked at the disadvantages of some of the alternative energies proposed. Or have we looked at the disadvantages is what she's asking. For instance, how do we cleanly dispose the mercury and lithium used in battery manufacturing? From what we are pushing for, we need almost every household to have battery-powered vehicles or inverters. Additionally, have you considered land pollution and the mines that produce raw materials batteries? So, and she goes on to give examples in Congo DRC, where this is sort of, the land has been poisoned and all of that. So I guess we get the gist of where the talk is going, the comment or the question is coming from. So I'm going to direct this first of all at Debola. As far as the either the manufacturing or the byproducts from the batteries or the solar panels, what are the environmentally safe ways we can dispose of this? Debola, can you touch on this, please?
Thank you, Kola. Someone did mention that the solar panels are made up of cadmium and lead. Very correct. But you see, I think Akola Wale did say something about some landlords who prefer their tenants using kerosene to gas or something of that nature. The tenants are only trying to be, should I use the word, careful to avoid their investments, their long life investments going into flames based on their understanding. Because in the real sense, there's no product, there's no item that does not have its hazardous side. But the idea of the manufacturer is to limit this hazardous side to the barest minimum. What I'm saying in essence is this: the solar panel has been manufactured in a kind of embedded way. So before this lead or the cadmium or other elements that makes up these panels begins to become hazardous to the health, either the individual health or the public health, or before it becomes a form of pollution, it must have used a minimum of 15 years lifespan. That's for the panels. For the batteries, after the life cycle must have outlived its life cycle. There are different, should I say, bodies who focus on end products. Just like as an entrepreneur, I'm focusing on the first product. There are some other entrepreneurs, there are some other government agencies, both the state government and the federal government, who are so keen about end products. I would use Lagos State for instance. Now, Lagos State has about, not to exaggerate, but I think they have about 10 acres of land in the outskirts of Lagos that takes care of products that comes from renewable energy, the solar panels, the batteries, and then the board of the inverters. From the solar panel, which is carefully being should I say
Disposed of?
Disposed. No, not disposed. It is being broken down into some smaller forms to extract some meaningful things in those end products you're looking at. When this is being extracted, they are put together, and then these things are being shipped to some companies who use them in bringing some first-time products to life. But all these things does not go into the public space because it's not really an area of interest for the typical person.
Mm.
Everybody is concerned about buying. I mean, we buy clothes every day from Yaba, Lagos Island, and so many other boutiques. They talk to me, collectibles. I don't know if they still exist anyway, but no one shows interest in the end product of this gin. No matter how bad as your gin is, you can rock it for maximum of 4 years. When this gin is all tattered and everything, you dispose it into your bin. No one shows interest in what happens to this gin. Well, this gin is also a form of pollution because if it is wrongly disposed, it blocks the drainage.
Yeah.
It becomes an issue,
It becomes
an environmental pollution.
It becomes an environmental hazard. And it's interesting that you mentioned byproducts, because even when we talk about decarbonization, and I guess this is part of the things we'll be looking at in the next webinar, the CO2 emissions, even though, yes, you're burning and there's combustion and you're sending this greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the thinking is you capture it and you store it. And not only are you storing it, you're able to actually reuse it, or get profit out of this end products or these byproducts, as you said. So in the case of the lead, the lithium, it to be, I guess, if these if these metals or these toxic metals do have end product use, I think people, especially people in the energy space, really need to look more into that, as opposed to just dumping it. For me, from my personal experience, I don't think Nigeria and indeed West Africa has an engineered landfill. We have landfills, don't get me wrong. I think there's one in Ojota, actually. But an engineered landfill, I don't think we have one. So if we are hoping to go into the space where we want to start disposing of our solar panels, our batteries related to the components in an environmentally safe way, it's something we probably should start looking at, or like you said, break it down into more discernible parts and able to extract these metals, export it or trade it, however the case may be. But yeah, shout outs to you, Pelumi. That was a very, very multi-layered, interesting question. And I mean, that's not all of it. She has more, but for time, I'm going to push on to some other questions. So I know, Ayotunde, I was going to come to you on this same question, but because of time, since we spent some time on it, I'll throw another question at you. But this one from Adeyemo, it's going to Kolawole. Kolawole, there's a lot of talk about decentralized grids, microgrids to benefit more from renewables. Is this a realistic approach for Africa to follow, given that developed countries still use grids to manage the intermittent nature of our renewables? Can we really bypass having robust national, regional grids with renewables? So, Kolawole, that question from Adeyemo is directed specifically at you. So, can you pick that up, please?
Yeah, thank you. Like I said earlier, like I like to say, we would hardly have a world without oil. Never has there been any time when either any country in the world where your energy mix has been entirely based on one form of energy. The goal eventually is to have more of renewables and less of oil. So in this case also, we would not eventually have a time when it will be 100% renewables. We would have a mix of both. But the goal eventually is to have more of renewables or more of clean energy than fossil fuels. And so yes, utility scale, we may not be able to use renewables, but can we use more of cleaner sources like gas? And don't even forget that hydro, again, we are lucky as a nation to be blessed with hydro, and we can do a lot. Hydro can give us utility scale in the country, really. Hydro is something we can maximize. For intermittency, definitely, we can then use renewable for smaller applications for a start, for homes, for rural areas. and then use hydro and gas, for industrial scale. So we need to have a holistic approach, and we need to have a combination of both. We will not achieve much with one alone. No.
Okay, thank you for that, Kolaole. Ayotunde, the next question from Debo: How realistic is the target of 9,000 megawatts from renewable energy sources, given the current low level of overall power generation? So Ayotunde, that question is for you.
Thank you very much, Kola. And I have to answer this as honestly and frankly as possible. First, as Ayotunde, who is an industry watcher, and secondly, as a Nigerian who is hopeful for a better tomorrow. Realistically, given where we are today, I doubt much that we can achieve that 9,000 within the next 10 years. The focus of even the Siemens intervention is not so much as very concentrated on solar or renewable energy sources. So from that point of view, the best I would say would be at least we may hit about 6,000 to 7,000 megawatts. And this is on the back of Mambila moving forward and being completed within the 6-year time frame that was estimated to be the completion period for Mambila. We already have 2,500 on grid. Adding another 3,050 is good from a hydro point of view. We hope that there will be at least 1 or 2 major utility scale solar projects within that time frame. But realistically, 9,000, I don't think we'll be able to achieve. We have redundancy of about 7,000 megawatts in gas investments, gas to power investments that need to be put to use in the first instance. So I think much of the efforts will go into that. But if I'm to speak like a politician and inspire hope in Nigerians, I would say, why not if not? Yes. We are counting on each and every one of you to bring in the investment into the country. Akola Wale and myself will be here on the other side to advise you along the way and engage government with you to ensure that we arrive at a sustainable tariff regime for your investment to stay. So that would be the political answer that I would give on that.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're pressed for time, so we're just going to take 2 more questions. And the first part of that question, I'm going to direct that at Kolaole. And this question is from Magbo Henry. Any insight on decarbonization in the construction sector? Is there a study of green construction in Nigeria currently? So Kolaole, can you speak on that?
Well, I think that we need to take these things one at a time. And I think that the biggest issue first is electricity generation, one. And then, of course, upstream operations of oil and gas companies in terms of prioritization. So if you begin to talk about construction now, I'm not sure even the government will give so much of impetus to that. But that said, yes, of course, we need to look at it from every area. And for construction industry, because of, the vehicles you use, the machines you use, and all of those, and I don't know, eventually, we say it's impossible, but we may begin to have electric tractors, rather than tractors that, emit carbon and all of those. And then other applications like your lubricants and all of those. I am not aware of any study now in Nigeria. There could be, but I think that for me, if I were to prioritize, I'll focus first on electricity generation, focus on upstream operations, and then while we begin to look at construction, because of course construction is huge, true, I will agree, but construction is it's in bits really. So as it were, unlike power generation, I can be doing construction in my house, Kola is doing in his own house. So except we're looking at large scale construction. And of course, for those, we'll start first with lubricants, I believe, and then we'll start with the vehicles, the machineries that are being used, and all of those. And that's a global concern, really, and it's not Nigeria. So maybe that's a challenge to whoever asks the question. If you can conduct the study or if technology. I mean, we don't have to wait for the Western world to develop it.
True.
And develop it, and you know, we export that to the nations. Yeah.
Okay, and we're going to be bringing this to a close shortly, but before that, we have one last question, and that question is going to go back to you, Ayatunde, because I think this is your area. It's from Obi A. You said you mentioned net zero targets and how Nigeria is a signee to the Paris Agreement. In financial model terms, can you quantify the loss of projected income to Nigeria or indeed Africa due to projected decrease in the demand stroke export of hydrocarbons? I mean, that's a multi-layered question, very deep question as well. So yeah, Ayatunde, over to you. Can you speak on this, please?
I didn't talk about net zero.
Oh, okay.
That must have been a Kolawole.
Oh, Kolawole, was that your...
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
I mean, when the person said the financial model terms, I'm like,
that's why I said immediately I saw financial model, I just thought automatically was Ayatunde, because he's the money man, isn't he? Like...
so this guy was. I think quite frankly, I believe, and I haven't done any analysis, but I'll say off the top of my head, I believe that Nigeria might actually be better off using domestically than exporting, because like I mentioned, the value addition in domestic use of your resources, we are losing that. Right? Imagine if we're using our crude, imagine the refineries we're working. In addition to the fact that we will be producing our white products and not importing them, and we'll be saving, jobs will be created, people will be working in these refineries. So I think that the value addition, that's one. And like I mentioned earlier, from a barrel of crude that we sell at about $40 to $50 now, right? Those who buy them eventually make times 4 more, if not more, you know, because they refine, they produce LPG, they have off gas. There's a lot to come from it. So it's about domestic use, really. I have not done any modeling, but I can tell you off the top of my head that, and we will find ourselves in that situation. In the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a decline in demand. In fact, there is already, really, and globally. So we need to begin to think of how we use domestically. I think we'll be better off, if you ask me, because we'll be saving forex, we'll be creating jobs, we'll be doing a lot for value addition. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kolawole. And that brings us to the end of the Q&A session. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. So actually, I shouldn't have stopped sharing my screen because I still had one more slide to go. I'm just going to bring that back up again. So at this point, I'm just going to bring all the guys back. If we're going to go to the next slide, which basically is just closing remarks. So we start in the order at which we started. So Ayatunde, if you have any shout outs you want to give, just want to, give your thanks or make any passing comments, just take 1 minute, 30 seconds, just speak on it, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Kola. One thing I wanted to say, which was really jumping onto what Debola has said, is in Nigeria here, we are likely going to have that problem of decommissioning. So the earlier we raise that topic and bring it to the forefront, the better. Debola had talked about the uses of the solar panels, the batteries when they reach the end life. I had tried to work with a client, hopefully I think that job may have gone to Kolawole, on how to bring that discussion to the fore. And we are talking about how to manage the e-waste in the renewable sector, renewable energy sector, both for solar panels, the batteries, and every component that there is. So it's one thing we need to start discussing now, because we have a penchant for forgetting what is going to happen down the line in this country, and we need to bring that. And it, as Debola has said, it's a whole new investment opportunity area for investors. So I want us to begin to focus on that. I want to give a big shout out to the Efikos for giving me this platform. I hope to be back again because I've thoroughly enjoyed today's session, and I've met the the members prior to today, and I think I like every one of them. We have kindred spirits, and from the chats that have been going on also, I have found my brother in arms. So I'm happy to have been here today, and I want to say thank you very much to the audience also for listening in. You've been fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Kolaole, any closing remarks?
Yes, I mean, thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to the Efikos, great time. And of course, like Ayo, I hope to be back again. And I must say that everyone should ensure, I guess this is the first part of the webinar series. So I look forward to the next, and I encourage everyone to join the next part. For me, what I would say in closing is the time is now. We do not necessarily need to wait to when our environment is totally degraded. Carbon emission in Africa is still fairly decent, perhaps in comparison with other continents, but we do not necessarily need to wait to when it's worse. And therefore, we must take a holistic approach to ensure that we achieve the trilemma for Africa. We sort out economic growth, energy access, and environmental sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kolaole. Debola, closing remarks, shout outs, please go ahead.
Well, let me start by saying, if you're in diaspora and you're listening to me right now, if probably you're thinking of, or you're already in the process of doing a house project, I would implore you to not go the way of getting main grade power supply into that facility, especially if you are the type who's going to be coming home probably once in a year or twice in a year, or maybe once in 2 years. You're just going to come back home with a $1 million bill waiting for you. Please don't make that mistake. Go the renewable energy way. It's sustainable for you. Whenever you come back, you can always have power supply to a reasonable extent. Secondly, I want to give a shout out to anyone who has a family member, a close one, a distant one, who is probably challenged. I implore you to show the person love, and I also want you to motivate that person. And someone sent me a personal message. The person said, how do you go about your daily activities being on a wheelchair? I think it has to do with structure, it has to do with passion, and then it has to do with the right thing. So, and then it has to do with support from family, from friends, and from associates. It goes a long way. So if you have someone who is challenged, please give that person support, give that person some motivation, give that person referrals. In any way you can help that person to believe in him or herself, please do make sure you do that. Lastly, I want to thank the Efikos team. It's been wonderful. It's been really, really wonderful. It's been a good journey with you guys. And it's a journey, like the other speakers have said, I really want to walk again. I really want to work again because, you know, I joined a team of people who hammer so much on engineers doing more than just field work. I say it publicly that this is my first Zoom section. I'd rather be on the field than be behind the laptop like Ayotunde or Akolawole, you know. But I think I've discovered a new side of myself. I've unlocked a new side of my inner self, and I think I'm good to go in this direction one more time.
Yeah.
Catch you guys soon. Thank you.
Nah, see, that's good to hear, man. That's really good to hear. You see, I had a whole speech prepared, like I was gonna come in and say these nice things, but you stole my thunder now, Debola. There's no way I can say anything to top what you said. So shout outs to all our panelists. Thank you for being a part of our webinar today.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely
I crave your indulgence. I want to give a shout out to Ayotunde.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that I've come a long way. And just when I was in the solar industry, Ayokole was my client, was my customer. and then I moved to consulting and we became competitors. And then interestingly, we become, you know, good friends and brothers. So I have to shout out to you, and of course, thank you for the introduction to the Efikos team. We'll build more clients to battle together to win.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, sir. That's the spirit, man. And honestly,
yes.
I like that kind of spirit, because the truth of the matter is, as long as you're in this competitive space, there is more than enough to go around. If I can use the words, there's enough for everybody to eat from. So one person's shine does not put darkness over another person. Whilst it's a competitive space, and a lot of us, we enjoy competition. It pushes us, it drives technology, drives innovation. So we encourage as many of us as possible, colleagues, friends, Nigerians, West Africans, Africans from the continent, come across, join us. Let's talk, let's discuss, let's share knowledge. This is what this is about. We're not coming across trying to say, oh, we know it all. The whole purpose of this is engage ourselves, mentally challenge ourselves. Because look, the people who we're looking at, importing all this stuff from, man, look, they don't. Anyways, you know what I guess everybody can see where I'm heading to with this, so I don't want to go on a rant or on a tangent. So let me bring this to a close. Thank you everybody for joining us. Once again, if any of the subjects mentioned before, in this, as far as decarbonization, carbon capture, carbon trading, use of biomass, use of hydrogen technology, if it's your subject area of expertise and you feel that you want to be part of the next webinar, by all means, reach out to us, email us at efikos@efikos.co.uk, and we'll like to speak to you and we'll like to engage with you. And yeah, we encourage as many people to come as possible. So yeah, we'll gladly like to see that. So yes, thank you once again for joining us this evening. Sorry, we've run about 20 minutes over our allotted time, but I'm glad to see that majority of you are still with us. The link to tonight's webinar, I'll be sending that across to all who have registered for this webinar, so you should be getting it within the next day or two. If you do want to receive a copy of today's presentation, just send an email requesting for it, and we'll send you a PowerPoint and slide pack of today's presentation as well. I'd like to thank all our panelists for coming through today. I'd like to thank our Efikos team in the background, working very hard and diligently to make sure everything synchronizes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and do have a pleasant evening. Good night.